Hello, everyone. Welcome to the June 18th, 2024 Lawrence City Commission meeting. And now I will have Sherry go into the rundown.
Thank you, Mayor, and good evening, everyone. To minimize distractions during the meeting, please silence your cell phones. If you are attending virtually, please ensure you are muted and your video is off when you are not actively participating in the meeting. The city reserves the right to turn videos off or mute participants. When the mayor calls for public comment, please approach the podium to indicate you wish to speak. Virtual participants should use the raise hand function to indicate they wish to speak. Please leave your virtual hand raised until you are called on. The primary format for accessing or participating in this meeting is in person at City Hall. Virtual access to view or participate in the meeting cannot be guaranteed. The chat function will not be monitored. If you have any trouble, the meeting can be viewed on the city's YouTube channel and cable channel 25. Please state your name and zip code before speaking. All comments will be limited to 3 minutes. Thank you, Mayor.
All right. Thank you, Sherry. I'll go ahead and get us started with item A, approve the agenda. The City Commission reserves the right to amend, supplement, or reorder the agenda during the meeting.
Move to approve the agenda.
We have a first and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. So passes 5-0. All right. Item B, consent agenda. Items on the consent agenda are considered under one motion and approved by one motion. Members of the governing body may remove items for separate discussion if desired. Members of the public may remove items as quasi-judicial for separate discussion if desired. Members of the public will be limited to 3 minutes for comments. I believe Vice Mayor let me know about one item that was requested to be pulled. I believe it was
B.5A, sir.
Okay, B.5A. Any additional ones?
I think so.
Seeing none, a move for approval of the consent agenda with the exception of B5A.
I'll second that motion.
Have a first and a second. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Passes 5-0. All right. Vice Mayor Dever, B5A.
Yes, Chris Flowers had submitted some documentation ahead of the meeting and then also asked me to pull this item so he could speak to some of the questions about demographics.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity. I'm Chris Flowers, and I was just wondering, I guess my main question is, who does the city consider a stakeholder when you're doing this public engagement? And I was just thinking, if Mass Street is designated as a secondary or primary road, I'm not sure which one it is, but I'm pretty sure it's one of those two. Shouldn't a stakeholder be someone who uses it as a secondary or primary road? So if someone uses it on their way to work because they work downtown, shouldn't they be considered a stakeholder since they're driving on it like 5 days a week? And I was just thinking, like, if there's a dog park, you would consider people who walk their dogs there a stakeholder and not just the people who live by it. So I just want to make sure that we're trying to reach out to people who use Mass Street and not just people who live along it, because you do the same if it was a park, or a pickle court park, you know. And also, I was just wondering, when you do this public engagement, I went to it and it was at the junior high on Mass and 14th, I think. Is all the public engagement going on there? Because I think a good place would be downtown, because that's the destination a lot of people are going when they go on Mass Street. So like, why just have it, you know, on the trip along the way? Why not for the stakeholders who are using it as a secondary or primary road? Why not have it at probably their destination? Also, another thing I really would like y'all to do is start keeping track of demographics of who's taking part in public engagement, because I noticed, I think it was on the 9th Street, like whoever did public engagement on that, I think they kept track of like age and maybe sex or race. But I would like to see like age, race, and how they're a stakeholder. Or do they walk? Do they bike? Do they use a bus or a motor vehicle? Or do they live there? So that's just what I would like to like if you're still going to be holding this public engagement, keep that in mind, especially the demographics, so we know if it's this is how the whole town feels, or is this just how a certain group feels? And I've asked people at work, and there is some disagreement. I mean, but I genuinely don't know how the people of Lawrence feel, and I think we should do our best to find that answer. Thank you.
Okay. Bring it back to the commission. Any questions?
I think I saw Aaron Parker on. I mean, I assume we take everyone as a stakeholder, but be interested in getting an answer to that question.
Yes, I'm on. I'm the project manager for the Mass Street Multimodal Improvements Project. We did gather demographic information just for informational purposes, as kind of a standard, industry standard thing done during surveys. We don't check that we got certain demographic, but we want to just make sure we have that information, and I can provide that. And the mailers to notify folks in the community about the public engagement meetings, of which we held 4, were advertised several ways. Some postcards were sent out to the immediate neighborhood, but then we made sure to gather to send out notices to the entire community through social media, which is our best way to engage with the entire community at once. There's no way to send notice mailers out to the entire community, obviously. And an article was posted in the Lawrence Journal World on advertising essentially the second meeting, bringing it to the public's attention. And then I did put up yard signs for those that directly use the corridor. I engaged with businesses, in some cases residents in the corridor, to put up yard signs with QR codes so that folks could stop and see what's going on and get to the website so they were notified of the meetings. The yard signs specifically called out the first meeting. And once the public was engaged, we noticed kind of a very large public open house relatively for this kind of event. There were 72 attendees. And that did dwindle, as word got out, you would expect maybe that would increase, but it did dwindle over the 4 public open houses. So we felt we were pulling in the interested parties for this project. The project was undertaken at the involved level, which is the level 3 of 4 of community engagement, not the collaborate level, because it was part of a master plan that itself receives a lot of public input. So we're essentially following a master plan project, but when it came to the design details, we did want to get community engagement, and it's a significant corridor for the city for transportation to and through, but also it's historic and signature corridor for the city. So that's why we went to the involved level 3. Collaborate would be if it was not part of a master plan, we would take it to the highest level. And I think we did quite a bit of community. We got 150 surveys back, and all of the survey responses are compiled in the improvement study as appendices. I think it's 500 pages long, mostly due to the community engagement that we did.
Thank you.
And in terms of the public engagement sites, will all of them be located at the junior high, or will they be at other places besides the junior high?
We held all the community meetings at the junior high so that local folks could ride or walk there, but again, they were advertised more broadly. That was just the convenient location that was in the corridor, and it, folks could walk there and say, hey, I noticed it was hard to cross Mass at 17th. Why don't, I like this idea about putting a hawk there, or that kind of thing. We never took the meeting outside to go tour the corridor, but we thought it was just it was also a good place for logistics in general.
Okay. Any additional questions?
I don't think so. Seems like they did a pretty good job of reaching out to the community. Can I ask one thing? Maybe consider using the flame as an opportunity to, since we're mailing out all to utility users, maybe there's a chance to put something about the meetings on there.
You might.
To reach out to more people, at a low cost and a pretty efficient rate. I think the flame might be a good way to try to add one more level of communication if we're looking for more involvement outside of the direct area around Mass Street.
Okay.
I did forget to mention that I sent out communications about the events with a, attached mailer flyer for each of the public meetings to a listserv that's compiled by the Metropolitan Planning Organization, the Douglas County Lawrence MPO, that reached a wide variety of stakeholders. I chose to exclude like KDOT, for example, but included transportation industry folks, representatives such as the trucking industry that travels through there. Mass is a minor arterial, and it's used for transportation of goods up to the commercial section of Mass. And for example, we also included interest organizations, and I don't remember the full list, but I can provide that. But the use of the flame would be a good idea for the upcoming City Commission agenda item, which is to revisit this with some more design details, costs, equipment, procurement and equipment on hand information, and talks with other municipalities about this kind of project. I think that would be a good opportunity to effectively advertise that meeting. And we can also do another social media blast citywide, or more than one. That's a good idea. Thank you, Mike.
I'm sorry.
I was gonna say, thank you, Aaron. And I think we appreciate you going through that with us. I think one of the things with stakeholder engagement, I think once you start to break down, we do that in the work I do in analysis of stakeholders, and you rate like within the first, the primary, secondary, tertiary, and you can start to get into a huge web of who you think stakeholders are, and whether or not those individuals consider themselves as primary, secondary stakeholders. So, in the work that you all do to be able to cross-reference and intersectionalize what that looks like and how to, cast the widest net to get the greatest impact, I don't doubt that. I don't doubt that you're not doing it. I do believe you are. It's just I think community engagement is one of those things that has a very sticky connotation, and it almost becomes a dog whistle for bureaucracy when we have to look at it a little bit more innovative as far as maybe community experience, community participation. How do we get more people to engage and participate in communicating, and not necessarily it being one way, that there's a loop, as not just us sending out something. So I think that's ever evolving, and we're seeing that evolve in the work that we're doing, what our communications team is doing here with the city, and what that looks like. I think the flame is the wonderful opportunity, and maybe this gives us an opportunity to elevate how folks can opt in to email, to the email announcements. Like I get the email announcements. I did that when I was as a commissioner for HRC. I signed up for the ones for Planning Commission, affordable housing, and whatnot. So, I think there's opportunities for folks to opt in, so that the giving the work back is a little bit easier. So there's that piece as well. This is work in progress. So I think the stakeholder piece could be as big or as narrow as you want to. The goal, I want to make sure staff is not doing is narrowing that scope before we even get it out there. And it doesn't sound like they were doing that. The only place I would say there's room for quick improvement, and I've heard this several times, we sent it to the Journal World. There's a paywall behind the Journal World. So that is a media inequity. So if something's on the Journal World, unless I know someone's logging information, I can't read about it, or if I pay 50 cents, 75 cents, only how much the paper is right now, for the paper. Folks can't see it. So when you say you posted something, or we advertise it in the Journal World, who's seeing that? And we have more than one paper in this town. There are two. We need to start acting like that, because one does not have a paywall. One does. So there's a population and a demographic that reads the one with the paywall. There's a population and a demographic that reads the one that doesn't. So if we're talking about creating access to information equitably, then we need to start moving in that direction. So, but again, Aaron, thank you for being able to reference that and share us what your pathway on this. And I think there's always going to be continuous opportunity for us to elevate citizen engagement, citizen participation in items that we're doing here in the, any type of projects that we're doing here in the city.
Her
Absolutely.
microphone is not on.
We're working on it. It was prophetic, moving. Everyone can hear it right now.
Any further questions?
No, sir. I think I'm prepared to move forward.
Okay. Since it's been opening up, moving it on to public comment. Any comment here in the room?
Stephen, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So you guys want to talk about public engagement, community engagement. It would be nice if you're going to talk about public engagement and community engagement that you actually listen to the public that you're talking about engaging. Because what happens at a lot of these meetings that you have is the public comes in and tells you what they think, and you decide that that's not in the best interest of anything. So you go ahead and do what staff has decided that you're going to do. It's just like the way the agenda works. You guys have already decided. We can see it on the agenda. We can see the way the agenda is laid out. You don't have time to do any kind of checking on any of this stuff. They've already decided what you're going to do. We don't have the trust that our engagement means anything to you. So until you guys can develop that trust, and it's not just a campaign of talking shit about trust like HID's doing right now. You've actually got to start engaging people and treating people honestly and giving a shit more than just discriminating against the people that you don't like, shutting them down, pushing their comments aside and saying they don't matter. Because if you think that doesn't happen in this town, it does. It's going to be a hot fucking summer around here because you guys can't get your heads pulled out of your asses. You talk about community engagement all the time, and every time it comes back up here, you guys, all you do is really, you prophesize a little bit, and I thank you for that. I don't want to congratulate you too much because everybody will think that I've got a thing for you or something, but God, you guys need to really get it together. What she's saying is right. We don't try to get the real engagement of what's on the street. You guys have no clue what's happening actually on the street and the opinion of those people. And are those stakeholders, are any of those stakeholders going to be the homeless people that are being thrown out a pallet and being forced to hang out downtown all day because they've got nowhere to be? Don't scowl like you don't know what I'm talking about. I've sent you emails. If you don't know what I'm talking about, you need to get your shit together, Mayor.
Is this
the only word that you can say to me?
regarding this item?
I'm talking about community engagement.
Okay. Is this regarding the?
I'm talking about your overall strategy of community engagement.
Okay. Just one.
How much time do I get back now? Since you interrupted me and took my time, how much time do I get back? You going to treat everybody else and give them their time back? Come on. No? You are a biased motherfucker, man. Really? Is that how you operate? You didn't think I could get germane with you and do this? You want to play the shit show stuff and make it all about performative stuff? This is real. Your community engagement aspects really suck around here, and you don't listen to your citizens. Everybody knows this, but there's just too many people that are afraid to tell you that. I'll give you more on that during public comment.
Sherry, any comment regarding this consent item on Zoom?
Stephen Watts.
Hi, thank you. I just wanted to add, please, with respect to Mr. Flowers' question and the utilization of the term stakeholders, these are buzzwords: community engagement, partners, best practices, stakeholders. These are mere buzzwords. Once upon a time, they may have had some value. But at this point in the road, the words community engagement, partners, best practices, and stakeholders, among other catch-all phrases, is focused on a select, easy-to-manage group of people inside the business community for the most part. So please understand, there are folks out here that understand these words are just that. They're words. It's not complicated to get, quote, community engagement, unquote. Thanks.
That's all the public comment, Mayor.
Okay, bringing us back. Any further comments on it?
I move to authorize the city manager to execute amendment number 1 to task order number 1 in the amount of $24,131.80 with Trek Design Group for the Massachusetts Street, 14th Street to 23rd Street Multimodal Improvements Project MS1-00005.
Second the motion?
I have a first and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. 5-4, none opposed. Okay, moving us on.
Did you say 5-4? Oh, 5-4.
5-4, yeah, 5, approved by 5-0. I'm sorry.
None opposed.
Thank you for, none opposed, yeah. Thank you for the clarification. All right, moving us on to item D, regular agenda items. Discuss the 2025 to 2029 capital improvement plan. All right.
Good evening, Commission. Allie Porter, I'm the Budget Manager. Very excited to be presenting the 2025 to 2029 Capital Improvement Plan, or as we call it, the CIP. Before we get started, I do want to recognize that although Finance is standing up here giving this presentation, and we'll hear from MSO in a minute, this is really a team effort with lots of departments involved, some that are represented in this room and many online. So I want to thank them in their efforts to complete this very big undertaking. In particular, I want to thank our budget analyst, Brian. You see him over here. Brian started in December with us, and we start our CIP process in January. So this is something he really picked up and ran with it, and certainly did the heavy lifting for the finance team. So very much appreciate it. He asked for a few more meetings under his belt before giving a presentation, which I thought was fair. So.
Could you speak more directly into the mic, please?
Sure. Can you hear me better? Yeah. Okay. Our agenda tonight, we have a relatively brief presentation, and that's honestly on purpose. As we get a more refined CIP, you should see less changes, especially in those years 1 through 3. Certainly there's things that come up that we don't anticipate, and we'll be talking about some of those changes this evening, but we're looking for a more refined process, and I think you'll see that reflected tonight, that this document is used to guide us and provide consistency on our infrastructure planning. So again, this is a long process. We started right after the holiday. January and February, we take submissions from both our departments and from the public. And then those submissions, those project submissions, go through a pretty rigorous scoring process that I'll touch on here in a minute. The finance team, as well as MSO, then looks at a financing plan, what fits in our rate models, what fits in our debt service, et cetera, all those different funding mechanisms that we have. And then those are reviewed by a CIP committee, again, a cross-departmental team, as well as our executive team, and then presented here in front of you tonight. So just very high level, what is a CIP? And again, it's a 5-year plan that allows us to look to the future and identify and prioritize those capital needs. And what is a capital project? These are projects that cost more than $100,000, and they also create a new asset or enhance an existing asset beyond its useful life. So part of our process includes scoring our projects against our strategic plan commitment areas, as well as things like regulatory compliance and strategic asset management and external funding. So we have a scoring process that are done by those that enter the project, and then they are peer reviewed by subject matter experts as well as our commitment champions. This is a 5-year plan, so assumptions do have to be built into it. Again, we do our best to analyze trends and come up with the best information we have at the time, but certainly the numbers are subject to change. So those assumptions that you're currently seeing today, you have on the revenue side a sales tax with 4% projected growth. It had previously been 5%, but again, due to recent markets, we adjusted that down. And then this CIP also assumes a flat mill levy, but assumed assessed valuation growth of 4%. Previously, that had been 2%. So we want to remain conservative, but we believe that 4% gets us more in line with what we're seeing while still being conservative in our approach. And again, those utility funds are in line with rate models. On the expenditure side, certainly do our best to account for inflationary increases as well as price escalations in projects that are in out years. And some key takeaways before I hand this over to go more into our projects. First, we are seeing that costs are starting to normalize, but you do still see high escalation for certain components. There is a very intentional, targeted approach to draw down fund balance in a responsible way in our GO bond and capital sales tax funds. And finally, this, can't be understated. This is a massive investment in our infrastructure, $530 million over 5 years. And so this is a CIP we're proud of. That's the CIP we're recommending. But certainly I do want to take this opportunity to make note that we are facing a multi-million-dollar gap in our operating budget. And we're also facing service level reductions because of that. And so that's something we have to balance as we talk about the CIP as well. And that's all for me. Thank you.
Mayor, Commissioners, Melinda Harger. I lead our construction management engineering group, and so I'm going to go over some of the significant or noticeable changes in a couple of the funds. So starting with the general obligation bond fund, the CIP amounts listed here for the under the stormwater category and the solid waste, they do align with the rate models, as Ally mentioned. One project that shows up and appears as a new project is the Maple Street Pump Station conveyance improvements listed there in the stormwater fee debt section. However, you will notice we had $3 million in for the stormwater construction program in year 27 and 28, and that continued out in the model. And so what we've done here is identify a significant, a priority project, and because of its size and priority, we wanted to pull that out of just the generic program and list it separately. So that's where you'll see that project at $2.2 million is now listed separately, but the overall amount still matches up with the rate model. Under solid waste, a slight change. What we had funded previously at the $39.4 million for the solid waste component of the MSO campus as phase 3 has now been listed as phase 2. So it's just a change in the name and the number of the project because we did combine the solid waste and the central maintenance garage based on direction earlier this spring, and so the remaining portion of that for the central maintenance garage is shown down below outside of those enterprise fund breakdowns for those that are fee supported from the enterprise funds. Other changes to existing projects include a budget update for the City Hall project based on a report we recently received from the design professionals, so you'll see an increase there. Also, the construction of Fire Medical Station 7. Previously, we had shown design in 2028, so now you'll see the construction of that facility in 2029. The previously unfunded wading pool renovation project has been moved up to start design in 25 for construction completion in 26. And to balance that, funding was reduced on the community building project. So there is funding in that project next year to look at the community building and develop different options for improving ADA and security, and then providing what those costs would be for that. We are ADA compliant with the entrance, but with the entrance being not at the front of the building, want to look at some options there. Also, one change related to an airport project. We had received a grant for the airport apron project, and this is the city's portion of that, so we brought that up to the funded side of things. And then under the South Lawrence traffic way improvements, you'll see a reduction. So this was lowered significantly based on the recent city-county agreements where we have less capital investment right now in the CIP, but the city would be taking on some assets, so future maintenance and operating costs associated with those. So then under capital sales tax fund, this 5-year CIP really focuses on that deferred infrastructure maintenance and again, that strategy to draw down the fund balance. So one noticeable change here is the ADA right-of-way transition program has been added to our CIP, again, based on earlier discussions this spring about the need. We are showing a ramp up to the gap in funding that would be needed in order to address the ADA over that 20-year program time that we had discussed. Previously, we had shown that funding gap at $2.5 million. You'll see here we ramp up to a $3,036,000 in year 2028 and 2029. The reason for that is that we previously had $536,000 in the general fund for the sidewalk improvement program. That program would end with this year because that work would happen as part of the ADA transition plan. We'd be addressing hazards and ADA compliance altogether. So the plan was to roll all of these ADA programs in together. We went ahead and showed that one, that funding transitioning over to this fund, freeing up that $500,000 in the general fund starting in 2025. The other programs will also roll in. We'll probably do that as an amendment next year. We just wanted it to be very transparent that we're not doing away with the ADA sidewalk reconstruction or ADA brick sidewalk. Specifically, we have a lot of engagement happening right now on the brick policy, and so we wanted to continue to show that. But all of that will be part of the ADA transition plan as it was presented to you by Evan as we move forward starting in 2025. So as you can see, that is a significant portion of this fund over the next 5 years, as well as street maintenance. Street maintenance program has historically been funded in a variety of ways. Sometimes there's a little of our contracted street maintenance program out of general fund and out of geodebt. We've reduced the amount that's under geodebt in this 5-year CIP, and we've also eliminated the funding from the general fund for the street maintenance program in this 5-year CIP. So with this spin down or the drawdown of the fund balance, we're doing more of that street maintenance work in this fund. So I will transition this now to Melissa. She's going to share a new proposed project for 2025 that will utilize a little of the savings of the general fund just in those 2 years, 2025 and 26, in order to put us in a position, the city, to be more competitive with grant funding for infrastructure projects. So.
I'm going to bring this up so I don't have to lean down. Melissa Sieben, Director of Municipal Services and Operations. So over the last couple years, we've been really looking at federal grants, federal grant opportunities, trying to really understand how to best align our asks with the dollars that are available out there. And there are a lot of different pots of money. One of the things that is missing is a comprehensive understanding of the North Lawrence corridor area. So basically from where we sit here at City Hall, just slightly a couple blocks to the east, or not east-west, and a couple blocks to the west, and then north on our corporate boundary on the east, up along the river, up towards the airport. There hasn't been any study, land use or transportation, since 1981. And Jeff Crick very aptly told me December 16th of 1981. So that's been a long time. What we're missing is a lot of detailed analysis that, for an example, the Lawrence Loop was one where I was sitting here and I was really listening to about what the struggle that we're having as a community. And you could bring forward some of this analysis in a much deeper, more meaningful way and start to address some of the transportation concerns that we see along North 2nd Street. Looking at the changing environment with tollless I-70, looking at our interaction with our river and what could be done there, which has been talked about by several people to me since I started here. Also looking at our pedestrian and bikeway connectivity, quiet zones, our underpass, our notorious underpass where it likes to pond water and catch people off guard. There's a lot of opportunity there. But in order to get those types of grants, you have to have a lot of economic analysis to go along with it. You have to be able to show some really good detailed plans and the community engagement behind those. So what Jeff and I are proposing is a very comprehensive study of the boundaries that I generally described that would then be turned around and used to apply for specific grants to mitigate trouble spots we have, make opportunities happen that we haven't been able to do in the way that we want to as a community. So really that's what this is, and I'll be happy to take questions as we move forward through the program, but I wanted to make sure that I could come give a little bit of explanation as to why staff has put this forward. It positions us better to dream bigger.
Shifting it down for me. Thank you. That really concludes our official presentation here. So we did have some high-level policy questions for the commission this evening in regards to any unfunded projects that should be swapped with the funded project, or are there any projects that should be delayed or reprioritized? And certainly we take any other questions that you have as well.
All right. Thank you. Thank you very much. With that, I'll open it up for questions from the commission.
I have a few. Melissa, why don't you come back up? So we'll start with that one since you gave the first presentation. Appreciate that high-level overview. You did mention the quiet zone. You think that's something that could be studied in this? I know that's been a request from North Lawrence.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there's definitely, we've had dollars allocated over time to do that. I do think, though, that when we go to do stuff like that, there's other things that are going to come up, like, well, if I'm going to create this quiet zone here, I've got these pedestrian connectivity questions that are going to come up. And again, this comprehensive study kind of helps us look at, okay, if I'm going for a grant with Federal Rail, how far do I want to extend it? What makes sense? And what aligns? I know our bikeway planning process will kick off again this year. Those things we would want to take in and then feed that into whomever we're working with, and use that feedback from the community along with much more in-depth feedback that we would get through this process, just to make sure that we're asking for the right things, not just getting one part of a system fixed.
And I guess on a higher level, I mean, do you see this, we were just talking earlier about the 24th, the Mass Street project.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, do you see this as that kind of study where we're looking at a corridor and taking public comment, and then a year and a half later or something, we have a plan to present? Or is this more of a process in which we can learn along the way and take advantage of? There's so many components of it. I guess I'm trying to understand what you see.
We're planning on this taking about 12 to 18 months. But there would be deliverables along the way, and certainly as those would free themselves up, we would be able to then go and say, okay, what grant should we, go after in this area? When I look at quiet zones, there's so much Federal Rail money out there right now. That would be one that I don't think should be as much of a challenge with all of the other work we've done around sidewalks and bike and pedestrian here in our community. But when we get into like stormwater infrastructure, because we have challenges like that as well in North Lawrence, some of that stuff's going to get layered in, and that may cause us to have to look at it a little differently. But no, the idea is to use it as quickly as we can.
And I guess a related question, we've already have some concern from loop enthusiasts about 7th to Constant Park being pushed back in the CIP to 27, 28. How do you see that related to this project? And is that a reason for that pushback or not? Was that unrelated?
No, the pushback, and Melinda maybe can address this, and I don't know if Jessica Mortensher's online, but because we are doing an update to the Lawrence Bikeway planning process, we wanted that feedback in there. But also, I do see this benefiting it. There were some pretty big aspirational concepts that the community has floated out there. And the question is, how do you align that with some of the other, what I would consider to be infrastructure, like our bridges, maybe they're impinging a vision that the community might have for engaging its riverfront. So I think there's just an opportunity, like I said earlier, to dream bigger. And with that comes, other economic opportunities that we may not have thought of with the original plan. But I do think there's a lot of feedback we will be garnering through that bike process.
Okay.
Do you have anything you want to add?
The only piece I would add is what we show right now in those later CIP years for that downtown loop connection is the amount that had been funded over the last few CIPs. It was shown somewhere in there. And it does not include some of that dream big component of a bridge or any funding to that level. So we pushed in those later years because if that's kind of what comes out of the corridor, the comprehensive corridor plan, we want to position ourselves to go after that once we have the full picture of what that looks like. That doesn't mean it couldn't move a couple years up and only do, the plan that had been discussed, the route from Station over to Constant Park, kind of using some of the existing discussions. It doesn't match exactly with the bikeway plan as it was approved in 2019, so it would be helpful to get through that process by this time next year. We'll have a better idea because what's been discussed is maybe some off-street route between City Hall and Constant Park, and that's not reflected in the bikes plan as it's shown right now. So some of that engagement, it would be great to take place with the bikes plan and then apply it to the project was our process, the thinking on that. So.
And tell me again the timeline of the bikes plan.
So it's starting at the end of this year, and I know Jessica could not be on tonight, but I was thinking it was maybe Q3 next year was when that was going to wrap up.
Okay.
She may not be happy with me if I moved it a quarter up or something there.
We'll hold you to it.
Okay, great.
Okay, Melissa, then back on the plan, I think you mentioned, would this study, obviously we've been talking about activating the river on this side, maybe on the other side as well. Is that going to be part of the study, the river, access to the river?
Yeah, absolutely. The boundaries of this, and it does align with the 2040 plan and the downtown Lawrence plan. So Jeff Crick is probably hanging out somewhere in cyberspace if you wanted to engage with him tonight. But he and I worked together to develop this with Melinda's help, looking at infrastructure needs, what planning ideas that we haven't been able to execute on, and sort of what we would need. And it's that next level of analysis you get out of a corridor study as opposed to a study of like your downtown area. This is going to provide a lot of economic analysis. It's going to provide a lot of community feedback, but it's going to give us like more detailed route opportunities, say with Lawrence Loop connection up along the river, or however we move forward in the future, whatever that might be, and how we engage with the river, that also would be part of it as well. So it's an in-depth look at the future of this corridor.
If I was going to move to a different topic, so if people want to talk about this, it might be a good time.
Well, I want to talk about the Lawrence, the 7th Street corridor. So you've got 1.6 funded for out years right now, but then on your unfunded, you got 13 million for 2029. That's unfunded. See, this is going to cost 15 million.
What happened with that is I think the previous project, everything that had been listed as the unfunded for the bridge and some of those other things that were listed originally as Kaw River Commons Phase A are still being shown in that unfunded piece for that. We could remove it completely, but Kaw River Commons A wasn't represented anywhere else, because what we had taken a couple years ago is we combined that Kaw River Commons A project with our funded, connection there for the downtown section of the loop. And we had a funded, and then we had the hope for grants, grant opportunity for the rest of that 13 million. And the other two projects, the other Kaw River Commons Phase B and C, are still listed in the unfunded categories as well. So I think we just weren't sure with pushing that out where to show that, because that was a resident requested project and we didn't want to completely drop it off.
Okay.
So that's what that is.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, I have a question about the Jayhawk Upper Reach, Middle Reach project. I don't know who gets to talk about that. Is that you, Melinda?
I'll defer to Nick, who I know is online.
Okay.
He has all the details on that project.
I assume Nick is on there. Can we take down the PowerPoint so we can see everybody in case they start talking things? Nick, I know the Jayhawk Middle Reach, obviously is water coming off KU and we're working on a project down closer to 9th Street, but I know one of the projects is Jayhawk Upper Reach, which is closer to the stadium and deals with Mississippi Street. I've had a few people ask questions about of course, the stadium project and how that would affect the Upper Reach, as well as part of that Upper Reach project has work on Mississippi Street, and whether or not we're doing anything with Mississippi Street as part of that bigger project with the stadium project. Is anything affected by that?
So the ongoing, Nick Hoyt, engineering program manager and project manager of the Jayhawk Middle Reach project. The ongoing Phase 1 stadium project, just like any development project, would need to detain any increase in storm runoff. So that should not affect the sizing or the amount of runoff downstream. A potential Phase 2 stadium project where they would develop the east side of the stadium would have the same thing. If they increase the impervious area, they would have to detain more somewhere in that campus area, the changing Potter's Pond or any of that runoff area from KU, they would have to detain more. There is no plans, the Phase 2 project from KU is, there's no concrete plans or concrete schedule, concrete budget. But I would think once that gets defined more, if there's improvements to Mississippi Street or changes to Mississippi Street, we would really want to look at doing the Upper Reach project at the same time. But right now, the Upper Reach project is not funded from the city side. Please let me know if I did not answer your question.
No, I think you did, and I guess maybe clarification for absent your project, is there there's nothing in the CIP about Mississippi Street and doing any updates related to the football stadium? Absent that, I don't.
Right, so the unfunded Upper Reach project was put in the CIP last year, which wasn't funded either this year or last year, before the details of the stadium project were known. And it did not, widen Mississippi Street or add, I believe that now it's been a year since I put that in there. But I don't recall if it added it didn't change the geometry of Mississippi Street, but it's not funded.
Yeah.
So I would think if there was some cost sharing component of that, it would change the score and potentially fund it. But until that happens with a potential phase 2 project, I don't see that project, a phase 2 campus project, I don't see that project getting funded.
So you see that more as part of the phase 2 of the project, the hotel and all those things, not so much the stadium itself?
Right, because the stadium itself doesn't change the impervious area that much. It doesn't change the water use or the wastewater use much, but a phase 2 project would.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions on that before I switch topics again?
I got a question. So when you were talking about the runoff from the Phase 1 stadium, you said no downstream improvements are required. Aren't we already having problems with the stormwater system through that Jayhawk drainage system district as far as being able to have the capacity to handle what's coming off the hill right now?
Right, so I guess what I meant to say, if I said it wrong, is any changes to, or the ongoing phase 1 project is making relatively slight changes to the impervious area and the downstream runoff, and they would need to detain that change, but they aren't increasing the problem, right? The downstream problem in the Jayhawk watershed has existed for 100 years or more, and the stadium project is not changing that now. And the potential phase 2 project, they would need to detain any increase of runoff. If they were to build a, different amenities or shopping center or whatever they're talking about on the east side of the stadium and pave that grass lot that's on the east side of the stadium, they would need to detain the increase in runoff so they aren't increasing the runoff to the downstream Jayhawk watershed.
Okay, got it.
And Nick, that goes back to your point with anything related to the convention center, anything of that nature. Those type of projects we could potentially need to revisit and look at KU's responsibility, their portion to phase 2, which would then that could then raise the score, and they could look at us potentially being able to fund that in the CIP. Or is that how I heard it?
Yeah, so there is an issue with Commissioner Sellers' mic on Zoom. I believe the question was, or to clarify, a potential phase 2 project, if it changed the infrastructure needs of Mississippi, and if there was a cost sharing component to the upper watershed project, it would change the score and potentially get it funded.
I'm going to eat the mic a little bit. So, based on what we're seeing, that potentially is going to be on that part of the stadium, do you believe that level of project, if there is to your point, a commercial component, there's some retail there in addition to the convention center, knowing that that is part of the project, we should be looking at communicating with KU about some type of cost share?
I'm really known for saying wild guesses, but I think until that phase 2 project, the schedule of it, the schedule of it keeps changing, and when and where will the hotel be? And I guess I would say I think there's a potential there to have a shared program between the city and KU to resolve the stormwater issue on Mississippi Street, and to add pedestrian and better vehicle connectivity between KU and downtown, right there on Mississippi Street. I think there's a potential there. I don't know how far in discussions we should go until there's some clarity from KU on the schedule of that project. I guess I would say, within the Jayhawk watershed, the upper reach is the least, is not such a concern as the middle reach and the lower reach. And then I also don't think that is, once the stormwater asset ID program and modeling runs its course, I don't see that being an extremely high priority stormwater project for the city. But there are, in that area too, we have public storm sewer right next to houses and kind of running out of the public right of way. And if you were to reconstruct Mississippi Street, it makes sense to resolve that storm tunnel issue at the same time.
Okay. Thank you, Nick. I thought when we had this initial the bigger conversation, didn't we rank these? And so I thought we ranked ninth, the Jayhawk watershed, then I thought we went with the lower reach and then the upper reach. So am I remembering that correctly?
Yes.
Okay.
In terms of priority, yeah. Just between the three, the upper reach is the lowest priority. But I guess what I was trying to say at the end was we have this citywide modeling effort that's going on.
Right.
And I think as that is completed, instead of just judging the 3 projects, we will need to judge the 2 remaining projects versus the other 100 across the city.
Right. And you kind of preempted a question I had that I'll yield to Commissioner Finkelstein, but in regards to the asset management question I was going to ask in the forecasting, but I'll yield back to Commissioner Finkelstein.
I'm switching to Parks and Rec, so if you want to ask that question now.
No, I mean, it was more of just a general question. I know we're using the priority base and our CIP questionnaire, and Nick kind of alluded to my question at what point, if we haven't, when will we start to see the asset management piece weighed into this? And do we know how it will weigh in? Or do we even know what, I don't want us to get too ahead of ourselves of trying to figure out what that weight is, but I just didn't know if we were already weighing projects with the asset management piece, or are we not quite there yet?
Yes. Nick, I was going to jump in really quick. Just in general, the CIP guidelines and our prioritization of CIP projects does have 6 points that can be allotted to a project for asset management.
Okay.
But the piece that's going to give us some information on our stormwater system, we're looking at the end of 2025, Nick, kind of that asset ID program wrapping up about that time frame.
Okay.
So then that information would be used to
okay.
assign the scores for those stormwater projects.
Wonderful. Thanks. I saw Nick nod his head, so we're good.
Okay. Mark, I guess you stood up. You ready? Wanted a clarification on the we have in there the youth sports complex full artificial turf. We had a artificial turf in the CIP last year. Is this the same project or a new fields?
Correct. Mark Hecker, Assistant Director with Parks and Rec. It's the same project. So we had anticipated construction being started by now. We've gotten into a number of regulatory issues dealing with drainage out there. So we're going through some additional studies. So we think that project's probably going to kick off this fall, but most of it's going to get paid into next year. So we move the funding into next year. Same project, just move the funding forward.
Okay. Thank you. And I had a question and had a few people ask me the pickleball courts on the spreadsheet aren't funded, but on the project sheet are shown as funded. Which one is correct?
The spreadsheet is correct, says unfunded. So as we've kind of transitioned through this, sometimes the description of the project didn't catch up with the spreadsheet as we were making changes. So it's currently on the unfunded list.
Okay. And if it was moved to funded, it mentions putting it out by the softball fields at Clinton Park. Can you tell us tell me where that would be?
Sure. So one of the basic ideas we're looking for a pickleball complex is there's a noise factor with pickleball. So we don't want to be in direct proximity to residential area. So what we're proposing is going out north of the parking lot at the adult softball complex. So it'd kind of be north of the fields, north of the parking lot, and put it right next to the parking where we can add maybe a restroom for the parking lot. We could light those courts, wouldn't interfere with neighbors. So I think it'd be a pretty good use, and it's kind of adult use, adult use. We've also dreamed about moving sand volleyball out there to the other end of the parking lot. So we create this kind of adult recreation complex. So that's kind of the big dream. But we think, we know we need to be away from residential with the pickleball, especially if, I think we were talking about 12 courts, so.
Okay.
It would be a big complex.
Well, I know it's a high priority for some. So
Yes, yes.
I'm sure you've heard from a few of them.
We have not heard, oh, yes.
Yeah, actually, I would like to speak to that.
Yeah.
So you're saying we probably shouldn't put them in neighborhoods, but we've got one in a neighborhood where I get lots of complaints about noise.
Yeah, and at Lions Park.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's the live and learn part of that. So when we transition those tennis courts to pickleball courts, very popular, it's still getting used, but we didn't think about the peripheral noise around that. And that's something a lot of municipalities have learned, that you really need some distance from those pickleball complexes away from residential. So that's one of the things we're trying to address with this.
So do you think you'll put back tennis courts at Lions Park to You're just going to keep.
Certainly a possibility. The tennis nets are still there. We just added the pickleball on both sides of them.
And I think did they convert the basketball court too?
There's still basketball there now.
But do they sometimes use that as a pickleball?
No, it's separate. So you got basketball on one side. Then there was 2 tennis courts before, and we just made it into 8.
So you don't necessarily see any future changing that back to the tennis courts because of the noise.
It has potential to do that, certainly.
My other question is related to the South Park. Obviously, it's now in the CIP after we learned we need to do something with it, and it's proposed to be a spray park, which I think makes sense. But I guess my question is, with our presentation the other week, we're looking at a pretty major spray park at the new aquatic center. I'm not trying to open up too big of a can of worms, but has there been discussion about having 2 spray parks that close together? Would they be with different age groups, or what do you see there?
No, I think you're identifying something that is worth conversation, and maybe we want to distribute the splash pads. The 2 we have are very, very popular. So the outdoor renovation of the outdoor pool shows a splash pad as part of that renovation. So we were already on the planning route for that, and then the splash pad at South Park, or the wading pool at South Park, went down. So either we convert that to a splash pad, we aren't probably going back with a wading pool, or we take the wading pool completely out and just put the splash pad at the outdoor pool, or we do both, or we say, let's do the outdoor pool and move the funding we were going to use at South Park to a different location in the city. So in our comprehensive plan, you'll see 4 or 5 future splash pads. So it's Dad Perry Park, it's Holcomb Park, it's the place out by the police facility. So going west further. So yeah, traditionally there's been a wading pool in South Park since the 50s. So is it something we want to continue historical value? We know if we put the splash pad in, we're going to take up a pretty big piece of real estate, because not only do you have the splash pad, but you have the mechanical systems that go with it, which is almost as big as the splash pad. So if you go look at Lions, you'll see that big fenced area. So I have a little concern about taking up prime park real estate. However, there's always been something there. So, I would certainly welcome your opinions on this, whether we want to do both or we want to do one or the other. If we decide we don't want to do the outdoor aquatic center, we could roll that money into more renovation of whatever we decide, more lazy river, more water. So, there's a lot of options here, and I don't think any of them are wrong. They're all great ideas. It's just a matter of preference.
Obviously, we still have public comment going on with the pool renovation. Could we add in some sort of public engagement, like if there was a splash pad at both places, which one would you use, or
We could do that.
sort of that?
Yeah, we're actually writing the survey right now, so we could maybe add some verbiage in for that conversation. They would basically be serving the same demographics, so it's basically toddlers through 7-year-olds. So that's the group that use the splash pads the most. There are some older kids, but mostly it's the smaller kids. So the idea of the outdoor aquatic center is we would extend the season of the aquatics so we could open in early May and stay open until October, even though the pool might close. So, and we already have the mechanical systems available there, so we wouldn't have to reproduce mechanical systems. So there's, like I said, there's so many options, and it's honestly up to our preference, but we could sure add a question about that.
Well, for the record, I don't have an opinion yet, but I do have an opinion we should ask the people.
Yeah.
And see what we think, because I could see some benefit to consolidating and spending more money on the major pool at least, maybe also west. But there is certainly value to have it in South Park. Anyway, I just want to know more.
Just curious, how would you word that? I mean, do you want
Yeah.
a splash pad here or there, or would you prefer it in South Park as opposed to attached? I don't know, I'm trying to think how that might be worded
Yeah.
to get the input we want.
I think it's-
Should a splash pad be included in the outdoor aquatic center? And if not, where?
Yeah.
Or something like that.
Yeah, think about, I don't know the answer off that, but I guess, clearly the other splash pads get used, even though the one in East Lawrence and North Lawrence aren't that far away from the,
Right.
and so it could be that people say, hey, look, I want a smaller environment, I don't want as many kids around, and so yes, I would use a smaller splash pad. So maybe the question would center around if there was a larger splash pad at the main pool, would you still be interested in using other smaller splash pads across the city or something?
Okay, sure.
But I'm thinking on the fly here, so.
I have a question about the splash
Yeah.
pad. So one of the concerns I have wherever it goes is that if we just have it at the outdoor one, then you got to pay to get in, where all of our splash pads are free right now. And so.
Yeah, this is an operational thing. What we're thinking is, so right now we're opening the outdoor pool at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. So in the morning, we may just have the splash pad open for free, and we would close it down. And then as we transition to the pool operation, it becomes part of the pool operation. So then you would be paying to come in and use the whole pool. Or if the pool closes at, let's pick 8 o'clock, we may be able to run the splash pad till 9 o'clock, just as a separate facility, because we'll have the ability to gate it off. And same thing with early in the season or late in the season. So we know we usually in October or August, we start losing our lifeguards in, second week of August. So then sometimes we switch to just weekends on operations. This would allow us to use that splash pad during the week still. So we haven't quite figured out all the details, but that's the concept we're going with.
But the bulk of the day, though, would still be charged.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So that could be an issue too.
Yeah, I think that's an issue. Yeah.
Yeah, that's potential. Yeah, that would lend itself to.
I'm not saying to
still
put in South Park. I'm just saying that's something we need to consider since our spray parks to date have been free.
Good point.
Mark, real quick, are there any, I'm trying to go up, map them in my mind, but do we have any splash parks west of Iowa?
No, we do not.
Okay.
So we're east and north right now.
Okay.
So, if we come to South Park, we get a little more central, but we're still pretty east.
Please.
So, we need to get out to Holcomb, we need to get to Dad Perry, we need to get to what we call Eisenhower Road
Eisenhower.
Park behind the police facility.
I got one
Those are
more.
all my questions.
Okay, I got one more question on Parks and Rec. You've got the Sports Pavilion Lawrence turf replacement at $850,000 in 2027. Where's the turf out there?
So you have that soccer area, so you have all the gyms, and then there's a soccer area. If you look over the mezzanine to the south, there's a turf soccer field in there. Very, very highly used. It's kind of crazy. So it's supposedly a 10-year life cycle, so we're at the 10-year mark this year. So we're going to stretch it to the 12-year to try to get it replaced. But basically, we're looking at a life cycle cost of managing the turf itself.
So that's the park or the turf that's where we've, I thought it was KUs for some reason. I don't know
No,
why.
this is inside the building.
Oh, inside the building. Boy,
So you walk down the mezzanine, you got gyms that way, and you got turf this way.
okay.
Indoor soccer.
It's our soccer.
From the basketball court.
Just don't remember that. Cool.
Any additional questions?
You guys hit a lot of them. I'm good, thank you.
I have a question about fire expansion. Quick one. So we've got expansion, and these are new stations, number 6 and 7, right? So we're funding them. So station number 7 isn't going to be funded or finished till 2029, and then number 6 is not going to be finished till 2027. But it looks like we're buying fire trucks for that a year in advance of those completions. Somebody.
I can speak to that. Commissioner Rich Llewellyn, Fire Chief for Lawrence Douglas County Fire Medical. The reason behind that advanced purchase is the lead time for fire apparatus. For internal combustion apparatus, our lead time is currently running about 47 to 48 months because those are electric fire engines, and that production line is relatively new. The lead time we're seeing right now is about a year. So we're monitoring that fairly closely to make sure the timing is right on that, but we are experiencing significant lead times with apparatus purchase.
So what would you do with those trucks if we don't have a station to put them in?
We would house them at an existing station, but ideally we can get the timing so they arrive relatively close to when the stations are going to be open. So we do monitor the lead time very closely. We have a local rep in the area who reps our brand that we typically get, and we communicate with him frequently about where we're at with lead times.
Got it. Thank you. Let me see. Oh, I had another question. On the downtown station for $2 million in 2025, can somebody speak to what that's going to be about or like, or what's the plan for that?
You talking about the transit?
No, it just says it's under facilities. It's the downtown station. Is it the bus or is this the police station?
That's the transit station
It's just, okay.
that received that grant.
I wasn't for sure
I'm not
if
sure
it
if
was.
Adam's on, if you had any other questions, but yes, it's the
Okay,
transit.
because I thought we were talking about another police station. Because we'd been talking about that before, a little sub.
Yeah.
So
Did you want to hear from Adam?
no.
Okay.
Yeah. That's all I got right now.
Allie, I had a quick question about the 4% sales tax projection. I know, and I know you didn't speak directly to it, but I don't want to make an assumption, but in that projection, were you taking into account knowing that there could be a slight revenue drop on the state level with the removal of the state sales tax on food? And do you feel like that's going to have an impact, or did that go into that 4% revenue projection?
I think there are many components that I wouldn't say we necessarily got that granular for a 5-year projection. We knew we were too high at 5%. We shifted down to 4%. Honestly, what we're seeing today, if I reran this today, I might even go down a little bit more. It's just what we're seeing throughout the region right now as a whole.
Okay. Thank you for.
I've got one more question, Mayor. This is about the street maintenance program that's unfunded, which is about $25 million over the span of 5 years. How does that bode to our overall plan to get kind of in front of some of this?
Dave might be best to answer that. I know Dave Cronin is online. He worked on a lot of that with Darren.
Yeah, this is Dave Cronin. I would say there is still some street maintenance funding that is street maintenance program unfunded funds in the CIP, but we are ramping up, and there is an increase over the next 5 years in street maintenance funds in the program. We just completed a review of the condition of the streets. We're still validating the information we got to look at the overall PCI. I would say our preliminary indication is it has dropped a couple of points in the last 5 years since we did the last review. We've also had a lot of inflationary costs to our street maintenance projects, probably about 30% over the last 3 or 4 years. So we're getting less bang for our buck and able to do less streets. But we're hoping with the additional funding in the program, we'll be able to catch up a little bit. But we're looking at having probably a presentation with the Connected City group to the City Commission later this summer to kind of present the overall street maintenance program, the results of the PCI, and just an overview of the program.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thought I saw a little one wandering behind you.
That.
Okay.
Okay.
Not right now.
Okay. Any additional questions? All right. I'm not seeing any.
It's a question that may be wrapped up in a comment. We always go back to this too. We go back and forth about it with the percent for arts and projects. So it's part of, I noticed on the CIP, it's part of the unfunded piece, because again, we have to activate that. Moving forward, I think maybe like a cheat code for me. Can we make a notation? I think it's the MSO campus is one, just as a quick cheat of projects that could potentially, that are considered for that. I know, again, it takes us being able to activate that. And so maybe sometimes as a quick point of reference, just to see them be like, oh, these are the projects that account for these. And so that if we choose to, as a commission, as a governing body, to enact that, we know what we have, potentially what we can request or set aside for that. But just, it's a thought question, kind of like, yes, it's the MSO campus and anything else if you want to make note of that for us.
All right. Looks like no additional questions.
I reserve to ask questions later.
Okay. Okay. All right. I think that's part of the process. All right. I'll go ahead and open it up to public comment then.
Good evening. My name's Jack Dolan. I'm a Lawrence resident as well as a Lawrence firefighter and the vice president of Local 1596, our firefighters union. I wanted to come here tonight to say thank you for putting Fire Station 6 and 7 in the CIP. I know last year about these times we were having similar talks, and I appreciate seeing it in there. So first off, wanted to say thank you. And while I'm grateful for this inclusion, I must emphasize that time doesn't stand still, and we've been talking about it for years. And again, thankful to see it in there, but we need to start acting on it. As even throughout this program, I think somebody had said that Station 7 would be completed by 2029. That just has the money in there for construction, and these projects have typically taken a year or two once they're started. So we're looking at hopefully 2029 to have 2 stations, but yet we're still seem to be falling behind. The reality is we already are behind with our the current changes to our staffing model. We're trying to keep that same level of service right now without the proper stations, without the proper personnel, and not only are we trying to maintain, but we're doing that with going backwards in our staffing model. So again, I can't emphasize enough that we appreciate seeing it in there, but love to see changes on it. And you know, the quicker the better there. So thanks again.
I was going to question why you hadn't addressed the fire department staffing issues before you addressed their equipment issues as well, because it seems kind of stupid to buy equipment when you're having issues trying to staff the people to run the equipment. But more importantly, the unfunded crap for the streets, you guys need a study to tell you how bad the streets are? Ask Jack. He can tell you how bad the streets are. Him and his guys driving the equipment, they get torn up. Ask the police department how bad the streets are. Their cars are getting torn up from it. Ask the transit department. Their buses are getting torn up and having to be replaced from it. The priorities around this town are jacked up, guys. You have a core issue that affects everybody and affects every department. Because with all these damn potholes and all the lumps and all the crappy roads, that literally just crap roads we have around here, equipment, motor vehicles, everybody's junk is getting junked. And it's a real expense that comes around, and it comes around more often with these heavy vehicles. I can attest to as somebody that drives a heavy vehicle, it's a hell of a lot harder on a heavy vehicle when we hit these potholes than it is in your little sedan. Because we don't have the kind of suspension you do. It shakes the shit out of everything. It breaks mufflers loose, it breaks valve covers loose. I mean, he can probably tell you about some of the stuff that they've had to replace and fix on fire trucks from some of the potholes trying to get around here. Adjust your priorities. You can save a ton of money just by fixing the damn streets. I can't imagine why you wouldn't fund that. 25 million, I don't know that it needs to be that much, because I'll tell you what, your streets, there was a funding issue that came up here not too long ago, and they were talking about the bids that came in and how somebody questioned why we didn't get more bids and why we weren't having more people bidding on things. And I got to tell you, the thing I hear is there's not people that want to really do business with you guys, or more importantly, them guys. That there's people that just don't want to deal with the bullshit. So something has to break, because if something doesn't change up there, then all of our stuff keeps breaking when we're driving around town, and it ends up costing everybody a whole lot more money. Adjust your priorities a little bit.
Hi, this is Chris Flowers, and I'd like to echo that part about the streets, like how you're redoing Mass Street. Well, what good is it if there's a bunch of potholes on it, you know? So I do think, I want to say, I don't know, but a lot of people want well-kept streets. So I want to throw that out there. I think that's maintaining the streets is more important than like doing new stuff. Like I'd rather have it kept up than add a new stoplight or something that's going to provide convenience. But you know, my car getting torn up from potholes, that's worse for me. Also, when it comes to the pickleball courts, I kind of agree that I wouldn't want to live next to one. But I was going to suggest if you take it out, instead of reverting it back to a tennis court, maybe look at what are there other needs that aren't being met by the parks that maybe it could provide, like maybe some kind of playground equipment for adults. But thank you. Y'all have a good day.
All right. I'm not seeing any additional public comment here in the room. Oh, okay.
Hello.
Yep.
My name is TJ Everett. I just walked in late, so I didn't realize it was time. But I live at 511 Perry Street. Please support expanding the fire department stations and our staffing. You know, we're doing more work with less people. So I have no idea if that is completely relevant. I just walked in, but
Yep.
Thank you.
Yep, it is. Okay. Sherry, public comment on Zoom?
Stephen Watts.
Hi. It's really kind of funny. We've got a $500 million project going on across the way to build a coliseum to watch people hurt themselves, but we can't get our streets. Just thinking about it. The reason I'm talking right now, though, is I want to support, let's keep the wading pool in the park, please. You know, that park once upon a time had a fire engine in it. I wonder if the fire department knows about that. Yeah, it was a big old fire engine that we'd get in and ride and go to fires. And the same is true of the wading pool. There's no reason that it has to be Mac Daddy Super Bowl equivalent. We're going to win world awards for it. Just keep it like it is. I think it will attract a whole different kind of people and family that come in there. The experience in that park is far different than the one over in the natatorium or whatever we want to call it. You know, the fancy public one that we're gonna reinvent the wheel again. But yeah, just throwing it in. There's no reason not to keep that pool there for the people that use it. Please, government is about service. There's no reason to take it away. Thank you.
That's all the comments, Mayor.
Okay. All right. Bringing it back to us for further discussion. And I think we've been tasked with 2 questions.
I did want to add something, if I can.
Yeah, go ahead.
So I did mean to point out on the street, because that's the street maintenance program, that's something that I've really tried to pay close attention to for the years that I've been on the commission, is that what we do have funded for street maintenance for the next 5 years is $61 million. And that's the most I've seen in my entire commission career. So I really appreciate that, but I'm always rooting for more.
Mm-hmm. Commissioner Sellers?
Yeah, I had a quick question for Chief Llewellyn. I noticed on, under the unfunded was Fire Medical 1-00013, which is to retrofit the 648 to be a sole hazmat unit. I noticed that's unfunded. Could you, and I read, so I read it, but I guess I'm curious to know, is there opportunities for grant funding? I know some of the things that live in the unfunded land, sometimes we can find grant dollars for. Is it your thought that we could be aggressive and find some funding out there to retrofit that unit so that we can get more life out of it? Or do you believe that that's, or could that be rolled up into something else, or are we just looking at funding that separately? So I just wanted to get the chief's thoughts on that.
Yeah, good evening, Commissioner. Rick Llewellyn, Fire Chief for Lawrence Douglas County Fire Medical. I appreciate that question. Currently, our frontline hazardous materials response incorporates one of our regular fire engines that's specially designed to incorporate hazardous materials equipment. That engine is at the end of its life, or our life cycle for frontline response. Our idea is to take that engine and refurbish it in order to provide a longer life, but as a specific hazardous materials response unit. We do believe that there are opportunities for grant funding for that engine, and I think we've had some success in recent years in applying for and receiving grants at that level and at that dollar figure that would get us there. So searching for grants to get that refurbishment completed is on our agenda.
Okay, wonderful, thank you.
I would like to add the fire, especially the trucks that we're going to buy. I really do appreciate that you're going electric on those. I think that's a very good move for our long-term goals. So thank you very much for doing that.
Couple things. One, for the record, I'm not for closing the South Park wading pool. I'm just asking the question. So I'm going to be like the champion or something. I'm not the champion to close it. I'm just asking the question. I guess, I'm interested in this North Lawrence comprehensive corridor plan. I would like, maybe as we move forward, a little more detail on that. And I think we're going to get a lot of questions about completing the loop we already have. I think we'll get some questions about, some of those other projects. And I guess, obviously some of my questions kind of led that way. Just a little more detail on how we might see that happen, and then kind of the timing of it and how it fits into some of those other projects. Obviously one possibility is this is funded in 2025. One possibility is you get it all ready to go and you start on January 1, 2025. It's also theoretically possible on some of these projects you even start trying until sometime in 2025, and you kick off in late 2025, which is, I assume you want to play that as soon as you can in 2025, but maybe getting some of those details out. And I just think there's going to be a lot of questions about that as we move forward. So if you could help clear that up.
So Commissioner Finkel, I have a quick question on that. So I'm wondering, from what I was hearing from staff, if there's some cost savings there, and there's an opportunity with those cost savings to potentially have a study done, do we need, I'm imagining, is that if there's consensus from the commission for that, is there a timeline as to when we will see that as a future agenda item? Or is that a direction that we need to go? Or you're wanting us to go?
Commissioner Sellers, I can clarify. It is not one of the two funds that we highlighted in the presentation, but it is listed under general fund in the CIP.
Okay.
Since it was related to infrastructure and capital improvements, we listed it there.
Okay, so there's no need for, wanted to make sure.
Commissioner Finkeldine?
And, I think the rest of, obviously, once we see the operating budget, we'll have more discussions on some of these, but I think for now, those answers my questions, and I look forward to getting public input on some of those other projects, and as we move forward.
Couple of things I appreciate Chief giving some insight in regards to the hazmat refurbishing unit. I had some concerns about that. Anytime I see hazmat and unfunded, that was a flag for me, but I wanted to see was there some opportunities there, because like I said, oftentimes some of our unfunded projects could be potential grant funding projects, and how we're noting that. And I know we've done that in the past where there's been some identification of things that we thought the Ferguson Group could go after for us as it relates to those type of projects. One project in particular that kind of relates to what we're doing around A Place for Everyone that has been on the unfunded for, I think this is year 2 now. Because last year was the first year, is the affordable housing land acquisition and development piece, specifically that AH 2025. I would like to see us find some way to get that funded. And some creativity there. I know I've spoken that I think there's some opportunities for us on the state level to be aggressive with legislature in providing some opportunities for us, but I think being able to leverage those, having some funding to leverage that or match those dollars if we need to, that could potentially be a point of access for us for that particular project. I'm kind of in the same boat as Commissioner Finkeldine, where I'm not saying yes or no about closing something, but hearing that we have not done a lot of improvements west of Iowa, and I would probably even say, Iowa, because we're looking at Holcomb, and I know we've had a couple of we have some unfunded projects for Holcomb, specifically for Dad Perry Park, that if we're going to do the renovations to the outside aquatic center, then I think moving those funds from South Park and redirecting them to a couple of projects would be advantageous, specifically for PR 1-0002. 4, which is the playground replacement at Dad Perry Park, as well as, I think I put 2-3 on there as well. Water Spray Park, West Lawrence, which could also be at Dad Perry Park, leveraging the dollars that we have for South Park to move it over there and be able to use it for those projects. So again, bringing some equity to the west side, because we do have low and moderate income pockets, but we also have, there is diversity in affluency and socioeconomic on the west side of town as well. And so I think that's one way, because I feel like it could be a little bit duplicative as it relates to proximity. I know we're talking about access and folks not being able to use it, but we do have Lions Park. We have other spray parks on this side of town that are within proximity of South Park that could be utilized. This allows us to pull some things a little bit more west to create that there. So I would be in favor of leveraging those South Park dollars to do some of those projects in Dab Perry Park. And I say all that knowing that we still have a master plan from Parks and Rec that is going to come out that, you know, could really have some play in this, but at least that's one that I thought could potentially be a low-hanging fruit project that's a quick crossover that could have some instant, we could see some instant improvement in our Parks and Rec. So those are the two I have right now, is just the land acquisition one and leveraging those dollars for South Park to do those two projects, whether it's Dab Perry Park or Holcomb or somewhere out west.
On the splash pad, one thing for the South Park, one thing we could do with the if there's going to be one in the new outdoor aquatic park, potentially figure out a way to shut that off gate-wise or fence-wise so that splash pad is free all the time, and is locked off from the main part of the pool when the pool is not open. So that's something we can consider, so we can keep it free to the kids and parents and me. You know, I like to do the splash park. So yeah. The other thing, you know, as far as there's so many good unfunded projects here, it's just amazing that we, you know, I know it's hard to decide on these, but if we're going to do anything, I would really be in favor of trying to move some of that street maintenance money over into funded part, because we're not getting ahead. It doesn't seem like, and we need to, you know, do a strong effort to try to really start getting in front of it versus just, you know, basically following behind. So that's would be my preference.
I have a quick question for Anna. So a little bird told me, and again, I'm in a private group chat with some local electeds from across the country, as it relates to World Cup, and they're talking about there's some potential for infrastructure dollars to be expedited or reallocated to communities that may host teams. Have you heard anything to that liking? Are you okay? That's okay. Maybe that's a nod to our delegation to be like, hey, give us some money, but just didn't know, or at least there was talks about there could be some potential there. So didn't know if that was something you all had heard. Okay.
Well, I know for my part, in regards, if whatever we decide with South Park and the renovations to the swimming pool, after, you know, studying it and results from the survey or whatnot, if there is the opportunity to go ahead and, you know, move some of those monies out west for a new spray park or, you know, some sort of amenity for those folks there, I might be open to it, because I know that's probably going to be as Commissioner Sellers, I think that's probably going to be part of the master plan, but to allocate those resources and disperse them evenly across town. So I think that'd be a great start towards that. And additionally, I know that I'd asked, I think we as a commission have asked many times about the land acquisition and, you know, affordable housing in that regard, to make sure that affordable housing, we can structure it so it's affordable for quite a long time. So if we can find any way to go ahead and, you know, capture some of those funds as well, I'm not sure if we can do it through our budget or outside of it through grant process or whatnot. I would love it. So, but no, as Commissioner Larson said, it's you look through the unfunded projects and you know, any one of them can, you know, be moved or switched. So I think you guys have done a good job of setting the table for us.
I don't have much to add. I just wanted to just hone in on this potential corridor study and the timing of all the other things that need to be done. I just want to make sure we focus on the big picture, but also we're working slowly towards the smaller projects as we see how they line up through the process. I don't want to kick the can down the road 18 months till we finish things up, especially things we know need to be happen. Quiet zone is a perfect example. I know we want to jump back on a pedestrian bridge across the river. I think those are important, but where it's going to be, where it's going to lead, who's going to use it, those are the kind of things in a bigger plan of a corridor I'd like to take a look at, but also not wait until it's done. And so I don't know what we can do to try to use the resources we already have and the knowledge you already have to make it go smoother, but acknowledging things being done and that they were going to be part of the plan anyway. I think we should just keep them moving and not wait until the plans are finished. I think that's there's some real things that have been sitting for a while that I think could benefit from moving forward without further study, I guess is what I'm getting at. And but I also understand that they're all related, and we need to make sure we're not missing a piece of the action, especially with these different corridors. Other than that, though, I don't have a whole lot to say on the CIP. I wasn't a part of the process to create it, and I certainly understand what went through it. So I just want to appreciate the highlights. I know Parks and Rec's going to get be preyed upon here in the future on and where our money's going to go. But I think that overall, it's good that we're thinking about sharing these dollars across the community, because as we lose green space out west to development, to infill, to public housing projects, or you know, we are taking away space for people, and we need to make sure there's parks for everybody. And I think the one thing good about being in East Lawrence, there's a lot of smaller pocket parks and space for people to recreate. But out west, there's bigger projects, but less smaller opportunities, like Dad Perry Park. So I think if we can focus on making those better spaces, as we use up these green spaces, I think people will have more places to recreate and not have to get in their cars to go east. So I appreciate all the information that the commissioners have asked. A lot of the questions I had previously, but I really want to focus on completing the loop as well. But I think this overall study is going to really help us, guide us on how we're going to do so. So I'll leave it at that.
I had a follow-up question regarding the study as well, just in terms of, I know we're a little bit early in the game, in terms of engagement. When would we hear any sort of information regarding that? You gave us the grand time scale, 12.
Yeah, grand time scale. So first was establishing interest, obviously.
Yeah.
We're hearing some of that tonight. And then what Jeff Crick and I would like to do is bring back probably some kind of a more defined scope.
Okay.
With timelines and some deliverables. We have looked at what others have done in this space. I've been part of one of these processes elsewhere, so I think we can get something back to you guys to look at and give you some confidence in the direction we're headed. Does that sound good?
Mm-hmm. Sounds good. Thank you.
I do hope, with this North Lawrence study, I think it's a good idea, but at some point, we just got to get this loop done. And we've been battling this since I've been on the commission, trying to, it gets on there, it gets taken off there, it gets pushed down the road. I just really hope that we get this done quickly and get the loop built. It's been way too long. So I had one more question. Is that okay?
Okay, yeah.
And I apologize for this because I meant to ask it during the slide presentation. You're projecting sales tax to be 4% growth. Is that realistic given what we're seeing this year?
I touched on this a little bit with Commissioner Suller's question. We started this process in January, February, and that's why we shifted it down from 5 to 4. If I did it again today, it'd probably be a little bit lower. I think the positive of that fund is that because it has such a healthy fund balance, it allows us flexibility to adjust in out years as we deem necessary.
Okay, got it.
Okay. Regarding the policy questions, it doesn't sound like we want to make any definite swaps. And is that what I'm picking up? Okay. And on the second one, there doesn't look like there are any projects we think should be delayed or prioritized. Just want to make sure. Okay. Did we give enough for you all? All right. It's looking like it. Okay. Thank you all for your presentation, all this great information. We really appreciate all your hard work. All right. Do we need a break?
Yeah.
Is that 7 minutes?
10 minutes.
10 minutes, okay.
Hey.
10 minutes, and we'll be back at 7:40. Okay, looks like we are work session item 1. The work session provides an opportunity for the City Commission to discuss items in greater detail. The Commission will take no binding action on items presented during this time. Work session topics are eligible for public comment. Members of the public will be limited to 3 minutes for comments. And the item on here, as a part of the joint Unmistakable Identity and Prosperity and Economic Security study session, receive a presentation on the results of the Lawrence Music Census.
Thank you, Mayor. Commissioners, my name's Porter Arneal, Assistant Director for Parks, Recreation, Arts, and Culture. And tonight we are happy to provide a joint presentation between Unmistakable Identity and Prosperity and Economic Security. Unfortunately, Brett Krumkano isn't able to join us, but she and Sam Camp are an important part of this process from the economic development perspective. I also want to thank Kim Onspach from Explore Lawrence for her assistance from the visitor perspective. A key strength of Lawrence is our identity as an arts city. As we see consistently from surveys, whether people participate directly or not, arts and culture is recognized as an important part of our community's DNA. Research like the Cultural Plan and Arts and Economic Prosperity Studies underscore this and focus on how to enhance our artistic ecosystem for both community and economic benefits. A year ago, Britt and I started meeting with Nick Carswell, local musician and a founder of Lawrence Music Alliance, and Kate Van Steenhouse of the Kansas Creative Arts Industries Commission to talk about our local music scene through the lens of both unmistakable identity and prosperity and economic security. We recognize the need for a deeper, objective understanding of the local music ecosystem. To that end, we collaborated to commission the Lawrence Music Census, which was conducted by Sound Music Cities. This census captures key information about the Lawrence music economy to help the city and community make more informed and data-driven decisions to support the music ecosystem. Lawrence is taking the lead on this in Kansas, which will also help inspire broader ecosystem support for our regional music scene in the future. Tonight, Nick Carswell of Lawrence Music Alliance and Don Pitts of Sound Music Cities will present an executive summary of the findings of the Lawrence Music Census. So I turn it to Nick and Don.
Good evening. Don should be available on Zoom, though I'm happy to do the bulk of the presentation, but we're happy to have him zooming in from Austin, Texas. So my name is Nick Carswell. I am the director of the Lawrence Music Alliance, and I'm a musician here in Lawrence, have been for about 13 years. I do want to thank, and I have to share this, Porter, is that right?
Yeah, sure.
Sorry. Okay, excuse me. Can I make that? How's that? Does that look okay? Yes, I do want to thank the city, who Porter had mentioned in his introduction, the Economic Development Department, Porter himself in Parks and Rec. At the state, the Kansas Creative Arts the Kansas Arts Commission, newly renamed, and then of course Sound Music Cities, who are the professionals who have done this census, this survey about 15 to 20 times, and are the experts in the field. I should also note that I am a field representative, contract position for the Kansas Arts Commission. We just recently rebranded again as the Kansas Arts Commission, but I do work for them as a contract as well. So the idea of piloting this in Lawrence is kind of very exciting as kind of the first study of its kind. So in the time I have, I'm going to go over some of the data we have. I've had this data for about 10 days, and it's extensive. So this is our first overview of it, and all of the top elements that I'd like to share today. I'm going to talk a little bit about the ecosystem composition, what our ecosystem looks like, what our music community looks like, the live events that we have every year, sector profiles. I get a little bit more into that in just a minute. Of course, economic activity is hugely important, and this is a unique study for that, to look at that aspect of the music ecosystem. Talk a little bit about future growth, further analysis, and next steps. Again, this is new data, and a big part of this that I want to say from the get-go is to have engagement within the music community themselves, to share and see this data, react to it, see what resonates, and what we can build upon as a community with Lawrence Music Alliance and the city leading that initiative. So this is the first citywide study of the music ecosystem that we're aware of. There is a 25-city cohort that is run by Sound Music Cities. We meet monthly to discuss some of our challenges, where we come together, where we have learned from each of us doing the music census throughout the 12-month period. The different cities have implemented different stages of the census at different times. So it's been very useful to stay connected, to learn from each other. And there is also an expert speaker at each of those, and that is a great way to connect to the wider world of music ecosystem development, music strategy, nighttime economies. There's various ways to look at this work. So the big thing which I was very excited about and really makes this unique is that we asked the music community directly. We've looked at, there's another variety of sources that you can kind of get a sense of the music community through nonprofit, arts advocacy, some economic impact, some creative industries, but this really asked the respondents directly. So we had 826 responses. The three sectors are creative, industry, and venue and presenters. I'll get into that a little bit more, but we also had people who could identify as more than one, as we do know from practice that people tend to wear more than one hat within the music community, within arts and culture in general. And then just to note, this is the initial overview of the data. We do want and encourage, and we're going to facilitate discussion for the music community, and we invite that to understand, first of all, to understand what the data tells us, and then to interpret, offer feedback. That is part of our process for this phase now that we have the findings. So to go straight in, our music ecosystem, these are the respondents. We had almost 3/4 were music creatives, so those are people making music. It also includes teachers, composers, bands, etc. We have 16% respondents who were from the industry sector or identified as representatives or individuals within the industry sector. That is a little lower than some of the standards that we'd like to see, but actually in discussions, the 20% was one number, maybe 15 to 20% we're thinking of a range that would be a healthy range for that industry role. So that is anybody who was not directly creating music or presenting music, but it could be in the music industry in terms of record labels, publishing, management, could be for adjacent industries like photography, web design, that kind of thing. And then 11% on venues and presenters. So those are people who work in venues, businesses that present music regularly. It is important to note that we spent quite a lot of time talking about the regional context of this survey and this census, this data, because we know that Lawrence is a hub. It's part of a Kansas City larger region. So we're very interested in how we know that musicians move around for gigs. We know that audience, for that matter, move around, travel to see concerts. So we are very much thinking regionally, and most of the respondents were concentrated in Lawrence, but there were individuals from the surrounding areas who consider themselves part of the Lawrence ecosystem. Looking at race and ethnicity, so these graphs are compared to the Lawrence general population. So we can see that the Lawrence music ecosystem has a higher percentage of individuals identifying as white or European origin, and higher also on Native American or Alaska Native compared to the general population. In contrast, has lower representations of Black, African American, or African, Hispanic, Asian, or Asian American individuals compared to the Lawrence population. We're very interested in this. We have asked ourselves if we did everything that we could to outreach to the community, and that's one possibility where we have some work to do, but it's also a possibility if this is an accurate representation. In that case, we actually have more work to include a more diverse population in the music community at large. So whether the findings, there's some crossover in the work to do in terms of engaging folks from different ethnicities, races, but it is relative to the general population here, and you can see what that data looks like. It's a good benchmark, and the first time we've really asked this question again. We looked at age and experience. So there is a healthy age and experience distribution. You can see over 10 years makes overall for all respondents, 77% of respondents have over 10 years experience. That's even higher for music creatives. Again, those people making music, that's up to 84%. And then the venues and industry have more distribution, but there is still leaning towards more experienced individuals. That's at 54% for industry and 49% for venue presenters. So how long people have been working in the music community and their experience is an important factor, which we can compare to many things. Looking at gender, the music creative sector. So on the right of this image, you'll see it's broken up into those three sectors. So the largest gap between gender disparity is in the creative sector, with 63% identifying as male, 29% identifying as female. If you look down to venue and presenter, that flips slightly, a slight majority for females working in venues and those places presenting music. And then in industry, it's slightly more balanced, tips more towards male again, but notably in the industry, there were the highest percentage of respondents identifying as transgender and those preferring different gender terms, suggesting a more diverse gender identification within the industry worker group. So just, again, a more detailed picture of who exactly makes up our music community. Switching gears a little bit to live events, this is a total number for all live events per year. This is based on the venue respondents, so an average of 129 events per year. 57 of those feature local headliners, that's employing or presenting local music, and 61% of those book all or most local acts as supports. So that is a number that we've estimated at in the past, and this is specifically through this survey, through the respondents, 6,500 total events across those venues, and that average of 129. Looking a little bit more at venues, the graph on the right indicates the capacity of the venues. So let's see if I can mouse over. Oh, it doesn't have that functionality. Anyway, almost a quarter have 100 or less capacity venues. And as you go across there, you can see 100 to 200 capacity venues is a much smaller amount. So that is kind of a unique aspect to the data that we found, that there is, compared to other size venues, there is a lack of that mid-size venue, 100 to 200 capacity rooms. And you can see as we get on through the spread of the size of music venues that are in Lawrence. Also on the left-hand side, we'll see how their tax structure is, or their business structure, 45% for-profit, 22% non-profit. DIY and house concerts are a considerable portion for Lawrence, and then it breaks down further. Just another note that 80% of all venues have outdoor capabilities. So when we think of summer programming, these are just some details. There are some deeper dives that we want to do on venues, including resources that they need. For example, this isn't in the materials. I've just parsed it over time, over the extra time that I've had to look at this. 41% of venues ranked staffing challenges as a higher or the highest concern. That's 41% of those venues. We also asked about resource capabilities, whether they pay for performers, what percentages, whether they staff for music. There is a question that asked about whether they make 70% or more of their total revenue during music events, and 48% of venues did. So not to try and overly complicate things, but I want to convey that this is deep data, and we're just started looking at it, but these are some of the top levels within the presentation. Shifting again to creatives, so these are the people who make music in our community: musicians, songwriters, performers, composers. Does include teachers and educators as well. There's some text on there. I'm going to go ahead. This is kind of to keep things moving. This figure, first one on this page, 31% work in music only. That's actually all respondents, not just music creatives. So 31% of the people engaging in the music industry work only in the music industry. Some data that parsed out for creatives: $101 is the average pay for local and touring gigs. 63% of those creatives rank stagnant pay rates as the highest or a higher concern to their music careers. And we're just going to keep moving for now. Of those who are songwriters or putting intellectual property out into the world, there are 47% of those of the respondents and creatives have intellectual property rights, but only 42% actually collect songwriting royalties. So that is something that is an obvious thing to address. Looking at how musicians use their home, 34% use their home for recording studios, a third of them use it for storage, 21% as rehearsal space, and 5% use their home for performances. This last figure, 25% have received financial assistance of any kind. That's, again, for the entire respondents. So 1 in 4 music industry workers or creatives have received financial assistance for their music work. So it kind of starting to understand the economics as well. As we look at music export, this is one of the top level findings that we're understanding. Again, I mentioned how we play into the region. This is a pretty astounding number, 9,663. There's a number of regional performances by Lawrence artists outside of Lawrence per year. So we're exporting talent. Our musicians are touring around our region, and that of course has great economic impact around the region, and it starts to create a picture of what is needed and how musicians are supporting themselves. Within that, or some qualitative data related to that, 64% of those respondents believe that grants would help develop those regional creative networks. 60% favor music export funding or tour support. That's a specific kind of corner of music strategy and music support. And 58% think that a booking agent would enable increased regional touring, and that would be useful. So looking to the industry side, again, these are folks who are not creatives, not primarily in venues or presenters. Most of this data, I don't think I'm going to read it all, but it gives a wide picture of the different types of occupations, the experience and how that plays in. Again, more than half of our industry respondents have over 10 years experience. One thing that is interesting is who they're serving with their roles in the music industry. So 25% of local music industry have all of their business from local clients. And then across the majority of the industry client base, 69% are local and 44% are national. So trying to understand a picture of how the industry supports the various parts of the ecosystem and where they're getting their business. Of course, we know that people can choose to live in Lawrence and get work anywhere, depending on their industry. So it's an important factor for industry, especially as we'd like to see it grow. And then economic activity, this is data based on the responses. The respondents generate a total income of $13 million annually across all respondents. So we know that Lawrence Music Ecosystem is an economic engine. This is income coming into households. 22% of that comes from music, specifically from music. The top performing the top incomes for music creatives are live local performances, and then teaching is 17% of that. I'm moving kind of fast, but we're going to have time for questions, I hope. So this is also a very interesting number. Annual average creative spend is $4,435. That's creative spending that on their music career, on their creative endeavors. That's $2.7 million total, and then 47% of that is spent locally. So that's a significant investment in the local economy. Some other things that were asked in the survey that we want to use to support growth. So this is more evaluative things that people said they wanted. 82% of all respondents want audience development tools such as local media, gig calendars, publicity. 57% want a place to connect with music industry services. 52% seek training, audio, video, or engineering. Within the industry, 64% of respondents do not hold memberships with professional orgs. So the industry is, I would say, in my personal estimation, not well represented with some of the membership organizations out there that aim to serve them. And as regards to funding, 61% were not aware of any opportunities for financial support. We listed quite a few grantors and other organizations that offer financial support, and overall 61% were not familiar with any of those opportunities. These are things that we are looking to address. So that was already a lot of data, and we're still just starting some of the data that didn't make it into this slideshow, and we want to discuss more is workforce development. So we do have data on specific training needs. There's some interesting data around career arcs, what I would describe as career arcs in the music industry. For example, people with less than 3 years experience, 48% of those get their income from an employer, and only 17% on an independent basis. But if you've been in the music industry for more than 10 years, that flips dramatically to 61% of your income is independent, and only 19% is from an employer. So we're understanding how we can support entrepreneurship within music, within creativity, and it's just the beginning of a conversation for what that looks like, specific and uniquely to music and the music ecosystem. Regulatory reviews, Don is actually an expert in this, having worked with the Music Office in Austin, and sound ordinances. Just a quick data point on that, we've asked concerns for music venues. 16% said sound policy was a high or highest concern. 19% ranked permit costs as another concern. 79% want an advocate inside government to advocate for them. And 76% want incentives to host live music to make it easier to have live music through various mechanisms, tax rebates or discounts. Regulatory reviews is something we want to study more, and I would assume this body would be interested in. And generally, we kind of think the other way to think about that is music-friendly policies, and that can range from everything to parking, loading, sound, public safety. It touches a lot of different points. We also asked about culture and belonging. I'm not going to get into it. Maybe if you have questions, I'd like to. I do have that data around how inclusive or accessible or some of those qualitative questions that we asked for how people feel they're included or their experience of culture and belonging. Livability, a lot of the same issues that would face many, including housing. We did ask questions on that, and we're planning to dive further into that. And then I think I've already mentioned the regional context. It's something we consider all the time when we look at data sets like this and the wider ecosystem. We do see this as a mandate for the Lawrence Music Alliance for target areas for our programming to develop and grow, and music ecosystem development in general. There is enough data that various sectors of the economy and the community should be interested in this, from economic development, tourism, nonprofit and private sectors, and the Lawrence Music Alliance has aspirations and plans to engage with all of those sectors. And then, of course, we have to continue to stakeholder engagement to make sure that we are reaching as many people in the music community as possible, that people have access to that community and access to learn and grow and engage with the music community. And that also just means more live events, collaboration, and those solutions that the music ecosystem and the community itself can invent and support. I just want to acknowledge some of the partners that were involved, most of whom have been mentioned, including Explore Lawrence, the Granada and the Bottleneck. Sound Music Cities were our consultants and on this, and actually conducted the census and the survey itself. And I think with that, I'm happy to take any questions, and I hope Don Pitts is still in the Zoom as well. I have more data, would you believe?
Well, thank you, Nick. Appreciate it. Any questions?
I have a couple.
Great.
First one, I know it said there are a little over 800, I think, what was it, 826 respondents. Based on this, we're considering it to be statistically significant?
Yes. Yep. And one of the benefits of being in the cohort is seeing other cities with some challenges around engagement. But yes, it's statistically relevant for sure. And yeah, of course, we'd like to have more, but we're very happy, and it's extremely useful information.
I was going to ask if it's statistically significant.
Yeah.
To that, we got the aggregate. Are you able to look at these numbers from a crosstab, looking at the different multivariants? So you're a couple of pieces here. So you're looking at industry. I'm going to speed through this on Canva. So your three areas that you were looking at was creative, industry, and venue. With your data, are you able to, as far as your demographics, were you able to cross-tab that and look at what does that look like as it relates to gender and those are venue and presenters and whatnot?
Yes is the answer. We've just kind of started exploring the data, and exactly that next step is what we're very excited about with gender and things like that. I mean, one example is how nonprofit versus for-profit, and I don't like to use the term versus on that, but there are some divisions that exist within the industry, and that's an example of one, whereas nonprofits have access to grants to present music, arts and culture. Those for-profit equivalents don't necessarily. So understanding any of these metrics and understanding the nuance of those distinctions is,
I think once you start to get into those crosstabs, it'll start to answer some of your questions as far as your blind spots and gaps and opportunities, as you brought up. I could see where there could be some equity gaps, and just in some of the initial points that you presented, and that things that came to my mind as to, I wonder what this looks like as far as what's currently being presented, but is that truly representative of what the community? And I think there's another piece to that. So I think you're on the right track. And again, I know you've only had it for 10 days, so there's more opportunities there. There was one I had, you had something about venues and the need of the community. I said, does geography play a role in that? I guess my question goes back to, you said region, and I just wanted to know, for the sake of this argument, how do you identify region? Or what is the region?
So it was the Metropolitan Statistical Area, which is basically Douglas County. That was the invitation. This is something we spent a lot of time talking about, and how folks move in and out of the region. So I guess that is the answer for the data itself. We did open it to anyone who identifies as contributing to the music community in Lawrence, and that was the open call. So whether you live here or not, if you feel you contribute in a substantial way, you're eligible, you're invited to participate. I think we're kind of really just beginning that conversation in terms of understanding how Kansas City plays into that role, how cities west on I-70, and then we're looking bigger cities like Tulsa, Northwest Arkansas, who are both actually conducting this same study. So yeah, in terms of the census, it was the Lawrence Metropolitan Statistical Area, if I have that acronym correct. But we're very interested in better defining, or maybe not worrying about defining and understanding what the actual activity looks like, how people move through. So it is a very relevant question. I hope I answered it to the best that we can.
Yeah, I think specifically, I was trying to figure out which slide it is, but it's the one where we are 9,663 total number of regional performances by Lawrence respondents outside of Lawrence per year. So I would like to see that. That's a mouthful, and so my brain was like, okay, so total number of regional performances by Lawrence respondents outside of Lawrence per year. So many of these are outside, done by Lawrence, but what is the outside? So that was my question, like, what is outside? Because you're saying regional performances.
Yeah.
Regional is a little bit, not saying loaded, but
yeah,
I can't visualize what region is. Is that Midwest, Rust Belt? So that was it. So, I mean, you don't have to answer it today. I'm trying to conceptualize. I'm trying to visualize the data to help me understand just the brevity of what was presented. In your presentation, you talked about staffing challenges, but you didn't go into a deep dive on that. So staffing challenges came up. Was there something to trigger what exactly is this, there's a deeper dive there. So I didn't know if there was a deeper dive follow-up to that question as to what is the staffing challenge? Or are we just hypothesizing what that is?
I think simply it's retaining staff and staffing venues in order to staff live events. I think that's the first kind of context. I've been doing what you're doing now for about 10 days, and I still, I'm not quick enough to pull some of this data up, but it's in there. I think one thing I would say is I'm already planning a venue and presenter town hall or a meeting where we can actually dig into this, that I would, again, spend time to carve some of that information up, present it to that specific audience. But that is a question that needs to be asked of the venues and presenters in town. We're, as the Lawrence Music Alliance, we're happy to do that. One of the challenges is even just engaging with that audience, because
of course
things like staffing problems, and making sure that effort and the discussion and the investment in this kind of community work is worth their while. So it's it's a bit of a catch-22, but it's definitely something I've prioritized, and we're currently planning in July actually to offer that as best we can.
Yeah. I don't necessarily think there's a correlation and causation to this, but it'd be interesting to know. Is it related to pay? Is it related to just workforce desire? Is there something as far as a pathway that we're not creating pathways to that type of work? So that would be something I would be interested. I think it would be of interest to that data, especially as you continue to talk about things as far as some of the social determinant aspects or modifiable determinants that are brought up in this conversation around health and safety, whether it's affordable housing, things of that nature, so on and so forth.
Okay.
I had a question about live event and venue, like house concerts. So is that like a real big thing here? Like I can host a concert at my house?
Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I need to get in on these
Houses.
Okay.
DIY is DIY also includes some larger venues. Some parties that might happen on the Hill would qualify. As we think of underage audiences, access to entertainment and safe spaces, some people just create their own. It's again one of the nuances of this ecosystem that we're a part of. But yeah, house concerts are a substantial. In the folk world, they're huge. They have conferences, and people attend them. Being sought after bookers because their house concert is just that nice, and it's a great way to get an engaged audience, a safe place, a totally controlled environment. It is not without its challenges in terms of how it fits into the ecosystem, but yeah, you could.
I love the idea. I think that's what the hip kids would say. That's pretty lit, but I don't know.
Yeah.
Just the idea of because I was just thinking about that as 129 live events. That is, I don't even think I can count on my hands how many live events I went to. It's definitely not 129.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess as far as the context of what that would look like or what that could be, then that does take away some of the parameters and blinders that I have as far as what I identify as being a live event.
Right.
So
I think this is really the first time conducting this study and asking the question. It's a great first effort, but it's such a broad, sweeping industry and ecosystem that how you ask the questions, making sure that everybody feels that they're engaged and they can contribute. Our goal is to have good, actionable data at this point, but we know that there's lots that happens organically, and trying to capture it all is certainly a challenge.
I know with the name change, so Kansas Arts Commission,
correct,
not the cultural
Yes.
Either way, I know with some of the things you brought up as far as access, funding, I saw a little bit of some leveraging, some advocacy work to be done within the community, the music community, as far as gateways to things of that nature. I know that the funding mechanism is a big one, so I'd be curious to know what the Arts Commission, is it their goal to look back at the legislature and say, we haven't been funded at 2014, 2012 levels? Can we at least get back to that? So I can see where there's a need to invest on a local level, but I would also be curious to know just, is there advocacy being done to ensure that the legislature is doing that? Because again, sales tax dollars flows through us back to them, and then we get a portion of that. So if I'm going to give you a portion of something, then let's be partners in this. Let's make sure you're at least adequately funding us, and let's get our funding back to where it was, and then we can negotiate that upward mobility from there. So that was just some high-level thoughts from what I could see from what was presenting. Like I'm hearing some of the advocacy, the human infrastructure side of this, that's maybe a little bit out of our purview, but there's opportunities to speak to folks on a state level that we can come back behind and say, yes, we're doing these things, and it could really help us if you leverage dollars as well to do this, because we can't take on so much of that here when there's an opportunity for our legislators to do that, especially when we're sitting on a $4 billion surplus.
Yeah. Well, I will note again, this entire initiative is an effort from the state, the Kansas Arts Commission, the City of Lawrence, Lawrence Music Alliance, and then Sound Music Cities as the contractor who conducted the actual survey. So I think it's kind of where we started. Lawrence as a pilot for this is the plan. We're really right now we're looking at what we can learn, and we're going to share that with through the Kansas Arts Commission across the state. But even within that, the ecosystem is bigger than any one sector. So it's a challenge to prioritize, to understand which programs should happen first with the order of events, and then while that's happening, the engagement also has to happen across the state, and Kansas Arts Commission is certainly committed to that, and with Lawrence kind of leading the effort and having this data, we hope that the studies like this can happen in other Kansas communities, and that we can start to understand how the music ecosystem differs from place to place, because it does, and across the state, and then what role the state can play in that, what role individual cities and down to the communities, nonprofits, and the private venues as well.
Of course.
It's a multi-sector, far-reaching ecosystem.
Very much so.
The kind of partnership that you're talking about is happening through this initiative, so we're really looking to maximize on it.
It'd be
I
good.
definitely need to thank the Kansas Arts Commission as well as the city for leading the charge on that.
I think so. We've definitely been good stewards of those state-funded dollars, and I don't expect us not to continue doing that. So I love that, we can be innovators and pilot something that can hopefully spread. And I think there's also a wonderful opportunity within the music community to see their voice and recognize the power dynamic that comes with being someone in this industry and a state utilizing their talents to build other infrastructure and to fund other infrastructure. And it'd be nice to see a portion of that go back to the musicians, or the artists and creatives is what the cool kids say, creatives. And so making sure that it's doing that, because I know on a state level, it's not doing it. It's doing it to a point, but it's not doing it at least at a point that it was doing it, at a level that it could be doing it. So, I feel like this is one step in the direction to say, hey, this is what the data says. Also with history, you drop funding, so let's put a little bit more funding towards this. Let's continue to study this and see if we can see some correlation and causation. So, but thank you. I love these type of presentations where it's a little bit of art and data coming together and telling a story.
I don't want to interrupt anybody if you have other questions, but Don has been on this call, and bless his heart, so I want to give him a chance, but I also wanted to speak to, it's been a joy to be part of this national cohort and meet with peers across the country, and I think that's something that's really vital in this, is that we now have these relationships and we're able to cross-pollinate ideas and see what other cities are doing, which are some pretty amazing results, and they've been through the same process we have. So I just wanted to share that and give Don a moment to at least speak to that a little bit and what they're doing. Don, you're muted.
Oh, sorry. I probably should be. It reminds me of 7 years of council and commission meetings. So thank you all for y'all's service, and thank you for the questions. But yeah, we're closing out the 20 plus city cohort this month. We're wrapping up. We still have Anchorage, Alaska, New Orleans, Louisiana, and Baltimore, Maryland, still in the field. But Lawrence has been a joy to work with. The data, there's so much more data. Commissioner Sellers, I think some of your questions, part of the deliverables is a dashboard, and that'll have a geography that you can find out the zip codes from every respondent. So it's completely anonymous, but we have a lot of work there. But one of the things that came through the data in Lawrence was that they're just really hard-working creatives for very low pay. Probably one of the lowest in this cohort. So probably not by much, but it's the $100 on the touring and the local gigs was one of the lowest we've seen. So, and I'm looking forward to being up in your great city next week at the Free State Fair or Free State Festival. What is it?
Yep.
Yes.
Thanks. I should clarify that we have two events next Friday, June 28th, as part of the Free State Festival. So we're partnering with that event. 1 p.m. and 3:30 p.m. Don will be here in person. So we'll have a similar breakdown of some of the findings and some community discussion. And then following that at 3:30 p.m., we've invited the Tulsa, our counterpart in Tulsa, who's going through the music census and has from the Film, Music, Arts and Culture Tulsa office, and Elizabeth Coyne, who runs Music Export Memphis. They will be in town here to kind of bring that conversation to that regional context. So Commissioner Sellers, you might get some more answers around what the region looks like at that event. And the only other thing I wanted to add was that where we've seen in the data that initiatives that we felt or found, where we use data to develop programs to fill specific needs. There's a lot we just know from our experience in the music community, speaking collectively, but we have seen many data sets that point to the fact that we're on the right track with many of this programming. I'd love to come back another time and give you more detailed information on the programs itself, but we are also, through the cohort and through other efforts at the state level, we're drawing on the expertise of really folks across the entire country to replicate or scale or bring programs in where we can. So it's been encouraging to see that, and we just continue to, we hope and plan to continue that work based on now this good data that we have.
Okay. Any additional questions?
I don't think so.
All right. Thank you. Thank you so much, Nick, for this information. Look forward to it. I'll open it up for public comment.
Go music!
All right, Sherry on Zoom.
I'll just see a few new folks, so I just want to make clear, if anybody on Zoom wants to make comment on this item, please raise your virtual hand, or you can turn on your video. No comments, Mayor.
All right. I'll go ahead and bring it back. Thank you all again for that information. I look forward to the results and seeing where this goes.
Thank you.
All right. Moving us on to our next item, commission items.
None for me, sir.
Not seeing any. Commissioner Sellers? Okay. All right. Moving us on to our next item, city manager's report.
Only 2 items, Mayor. The future agenda items we've got pretty well updated.
Okay.
Happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Craig on that? All right. Not seeing any. All right. Since this is a public comment item, opening up public comment here in the room.
I have a note. Hold on. Apologize. City manager's items, correct? Mm-hmm. The city manager's report is a great place to inform the public about the activities of the manager for our town, and he does very little of that. These reports need to be more focused and descriptive of what happened in the past week, providing items such as the manager's calendar for the past week or the month for public review, what meetings took place, what issues exist inside departments. These things promote transparency and build community. This report needs to include answers to questions posed to the city manager's office. For example, what's going on with requests to correct the many, many errors which exist on the town website. An explanation from the manager relative to why the police department has been exempted via the town travel policy from providing out-of-town travel documentation to the public was promised 3 weeks ago. As well, the police department is not exempted from providing training expense reporting, such as the cost of trainings, per diem expenses, and personal expenses according to the written town policy. Further insulting the public is the reality that the fire department is now not reporting travel either. A request for clarification was made and no response was supplied. An explanation as to why the town website is not correct and true and not filled to the brim with broken and useless links and old information is in order, and I've heard Stephen ask for that before. The links inside the Sustainability Department was reported weeks ago as being broken and information that's old, and nothing's happened yet. Got 3 of them over here. You could ask him about it. It's the city manager's report, but he doesn't want to report on that. The Jayhawk Area Aging Board appointments appear to not have been updated for an extended period of time either. So at the bottom here, he asked you in this written public comment that was submitted that the town manager needs to report plans to correct these kind of errors. I think you guys have a responsibility to make him answer those questions.
Looks like there is no additional public comment here in the room. Sherry, any on Zoom?
Stephen Watts? Whoa, there you go.
Well, what I was going to talk about was just read pretty much. And, you know, it is disappointing with respect to the agenda items being controlled, not so much by you guys, although I think each of you have a weekly meeting with our town managers, and I don't know how it's going in. It's just that, you know, all this stuff about transparency seems to me that this report is an opportunity for Craig to, you know, do us some stuff, tell us some stuff, you know, what took place in the last week, provide items such as the manager's calendar for the past week, I mean, the month, just stuff, telling us what's going on. And that's what I'm hoping you guys are going to be asking about in relation to the city manager's report, rather than just, you know, we can do that all day long, snap our fingers and get the hell out of here. Okay, thanks.
That's all the comments, Mayor.
All right, bringing it back to us. Any further comment? Not seeing any. Okay. Next item, review calendar items, item H.
So the offices are closed tomorrow? Is that what I'm seeing? City offices are closed?
That's right.
That's correct. Juneteenth holiday.
I believe so. Any other calendar items? Any questions? All right. Moving us on.
Is there public comment on the calendar item?
There is not.
Thank you.
Now, just to go ahead and let everybody know, the live portion of the broadcast will be ending. So I'll just go ahead and give a little bit of time for that.